Well, we're going to bring in Western Standard business reporter Sean Polzer right now. Sean has been covering in a fair bit of detail, almost daily, the move from still Federal Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault to end what he calls oil subsidies. Now, Sean, this is a confusing one. Subsidies are, I mean, they can take different forms, but generally it involves the government giving businesses money that they, in one form or another, can keep. The federal government has financial relationships, obviously, with oil companies. They pay taxes, and there are different things. But Stephen Guilbeault has had some. He's been very adamant he's going to kill subsidies to oil and gas, but he's had a hard time defining what these are, hasn't he?
To say the least. Normally you hand subsidies out to money-losing industries, not the ones that generate about 10% of your gross domestic product. He was in Calgary on Wednesday to talk to some oil leaders and some business leaders, and kind of walked away and said one thing, and then on Monday, initially it seemed like quite a shock when he come out with eliminating oil and gas subsidies, and kind of made my head spin. But the fact is that there really are none, and it kind of depends on what your definition of a subsidy is.
Well, I suppose if your definition of a I think the definition of a subsidy is giving money to a business if you don't like it. So if you're giving money to the Toronto Star, to the Calgary Herald, to the National Post, it's not a subsidy. It's, I don't know.
A bailout.
Democracy bonus. Support. It's support. It's investment. It's investment and it's support. If you like it, it's a subsidy if you don't. But there is no such money in that way going to the oil and gas industry. There are things like, capital cost allowance that allows, energy firms to defer taxes for capital reasons so that they can actually do capital intensive investments and be allowed to pay the taxes on that later. Is that something they're trying to define as a subsidy?
Well, no. So the thing that it pivots on is something called an unabated subsidy. So the idea is a project that doesn't try to abate carbon emissions. So in the last budget here, we have 40 to 50% capital cost allowances and rebates for carbon capture. Well, those aren't being touched, so because they abate emissions. So he was pressed to put a dollar figure on exactly what these subsidies were and exactly what they are, and he was completely unable to do it because there are no direct subsidies for upstream oil and gas direct production. The Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers put out the statement, said that they were generally aligned on the policy, and I kind of thought, like that seems odd. Yeah, they're aligned with it because there are none. And they've said that there are no direct subsidies for oil and gas production in Canada, period, right? But Guilbeault, he has to play to his audience of his supporters, these environmental supporters, the Birkenstock crowd in Ontario and Quebec. And he's taking it with him to the G20 because he wants to hold up Canada as some kind of a bright light. We're going to be the first country in the world to eliminate unabated oil and gas subsidies, right? Well, we have none. So we've particularly,
it's funny. The only subsidies we do have are abated subsidies. There's tons of government subsidies, both from Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ottawa, for oil and gas companies that are doing things to reduce their emissions. So, maybe for carbon capture and storage, for converting to into hydrogen, things like that. There's a lot of subsidies there, but there doesn't really seem to be that much in the way of subsidies that are so-called unabated, just supporting oil and gas. In fact, the only time the federal government really significantly subsidized the oil and gas industry was when the last Trudeau was prime minister, and they tried to nationalize the industry, and they end up subsidizing it because it kept on dying when exposed to what they were doing. Corey, what's the win here? Because there doesn't actually seem to be anything he's going to do. You can say they're canceled, but there doesn't appear to be really anything he could do. And it's really murky because it's like, well, does this mean they don't qualify for any subsidies that apply to all industries, like say the Canada Summer Jobs Program that you get no matter if you're making widgets or anything? Like, what's he going to do here to actually say he's not subsidizing them anymore?
I don't know. Well, I guess he'll just have to say it stopped, which is great. The win is with the energy sector. He's done what we've been unable to counter for the last 15 years. When you're arguing with people, keep saying, we're holding up your industry, we're shoring it up, we're giving subsidies into it, and they could never answer where they were. Well, now, Minister Guilbeault says they're gone. So it's done. Don't worry about it. It's over. The subsidies are finished. We all win. We're happily going home. And of course, nothing technically has changed.
Yeah, and I think it's worth mentioning that Mr. Guilbeault was actually not at the swearing in this morning. Mm-hmm. He had gone to another of these hot air fests that they love to go to. So as he goes, he is able to say in his speech, we have stopped subsidies to the oil industry. Well, nobody there is going to ask him what subsidies, how many, how much, what does it really mean? He gets a nice clean soundbite and farms that out to the people that he feels he needs to influence and stay sweet with, and he's happy. And I guess as there were no subsidies in the first place, so none got stopped, so is the oil industry.